photographing today in and around Pennsylvania. There's a Black Lives Matter protest poster we've got up there on the screen. If you look at the one up there on the left, defeat the right, it says, join the socialists. Black Lives Matter, it's no longer pretending that it's anything to do with race relations. It's just a front for the socialist left.
But it always has been, Peter. The three founders of the movement, Black Lives Matter, say openly that they're neo-Marxists, and they've always been rather open about their political motivations, being anti-police, but also anti-capitalist, anti-nuclear family. It's just that most of the media who report on them don't point that out. They just pretend they're there to fight for racial equality and against police brutality, but really their motivations have been clear if you've cared to look.
Actually do have an ideological frame. Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists. We are super versed on sort of ideological theories, and I think that what we really try to do is build a movement that could be utilized by many, many Black folk.
Organizer, and so I think sometimes people think that because Black Lives Matter is the biggest thing, that's the first thing I ever did, and it's not. I was trained knocking on doors, getting on buses and passing out flyers and getting people to join organizations. The Labor Community Strategy Center is my first political home. It's where I would be a part of what it's famous for, which is the Bus Riders Union.
Started by an old friend of mine.
Yes, Eric Mann, that's my mentor.
I'm very proud of my parents for at 5 years old, I was thinking about people starving in Europe. I didn't know what Europe was. And there's a world made up of Goyim who attack us and put us in concentration camps, and we got to fight them. That was the main point. My mom said, stand up to those anti-Semites. Don't let them push us around. So then when I met the Black movement, I said, oh, I thought Jews were assertive. Wait till I saw this is the ultimate assertion, the ultimate anger, and what I didn't get before was a revolutionary theory, a version to how people keep talking about economics, separate from race, separate from military, separate from imperialism. I understand imperialism at its core is an economic system. Sure. I understand it's the highest stage of capitalism, as Lenin said, but I also know it's a racist, Eurocentric, Christian, sadistic
supporters who were took that barge and lift that pail, and at that time they were carrying people's bags, and they wanted to drive a bus, and that was a radical concept at the time. The trailways would not let them be bus drivers or ticket agents or information clerks in that deep southern city called the Port Authority Terminal in New York. I've been with the Newark Community Union and worked there for several years, lived in the Black community, and I worked with Students for Democratic Society, and I worked 10 years on an assembly line with the United Auto Workers. In between, I spent 17 months and 5 days in prison and 30 days in solitary and a few other things. The last 24 years, I've been working to build the Labor Community Strategy Center, which is an explicitly left project based on different people's understandings of it, but in my case, based on what I call but the anti-racist, anti-imperialist United Front. And what that means is that we live in a racist society, we live in an imperialist society, which means that the United States is a world empire, and therefore the struggle against empire is the central question that determines whether or not you're left or not, let alone what the left should do. We're the Bus Riders Union, and this is our fight. Mass transportation is the human right. We want a 50-cent fare and $20 passes, because mass transportation belongs to the masses. So you dream and then you organize to achieve the dream, but that's what Lenin said. Hard to do. It's hard to lay out very bold ideas, but then realize you have to build a movement person by person to carry those ideas out. developed this concept of stopping the school to prison pipeline, which is part of a broader question of stopping the mass incarceration of Black and Latino people. And we like to use these counter-hegemonic concepts. So we've been developing the concept of free the US 2.5 million. Not just the US 2.5 million, but the 7 million people that are under police control. Because when I got out of prison, I still had 3 years of probation that they could have dropped another 2 years and put me back in prison. So for those 3 years, I was tap dancing pretty carefully because I had all the people that I'm meeting, these young kids today, who are still saying, I'm on parole, I'm on probation. We just won a very big victory in Los Angeles. The Los Angeles Unified School District overturned a school discipline concept called willful defiance, which had been used to expel mainly black boys from the public schools under a non-arguable concept of willful defiance. But the more fundamental question, and I've been thinking about this a lot, is, of course, we need a lot of willful defiance. And the pain that's been inflicted on black people through the whole series of counter-revolutions, 200,000, which we thought was as criminal as anybody could comprehend, and there's now 2.5 million. And I would argue that the hoodie, the angry black man, is the enemy of the state. So let's talk about a little theory now. Everything is theory and practice. In Los Angeles today, we've initiated a campaign for the fight for the soul of the cities. As I said, that's a frame based on the anti-racist, anti-imperialist United Front. Within that frame is the fight for the soul of the cities. Within that frame is the social welfare state, not the police state. The environmental justice state, not the warfare state. So we are saying that as a mass question. And it's important for organizers to come up with ideas, because revolutions are fundamentally about ideas, that are starting popularizing. So a lot of people are saying, yeah, I'm for the social justice state, not the police state, which means they're beginning to articulate that we live in a police state. For the environmental justice state, not the warfare state. So we're bringing that as a mass concept. And then under that, we have demands. And the demands are also very big picture demands. 1,000 more buses, 1,000 less police. As I say to people when you go on the bus, we want 1,000 more buses, 1,000 less police. What don't you understand about that? Everybody understands it. It's just a question, are they for it or against it? Then we have the free the US 2 million. We have a campaign, no cars in LA, which means no cars in LA. It means that if we're eco-socialist, if we believe in ecological anti-imperialist revolution, then we have to radically restrict production and consumption in an imperialist nation, in an imperialist empire. That's to say, it's no longer a voluntary choice whether or not you pollute or not. It's very interesting. We want to sort of free the US 2.5 million prisoners and imprison the 8 million cars in LA. And it's very interesting how people say, you can't take away my freedom to drive, but you can lock up all the kids. That's okay. So we're raising the question that we have a special obligation, living in the heart of the empire, to be anti-imperialist in the most explicit and international way possible. So in my opinion, the eco-socialist movement must be tied to a very explicit anti-racist, anti-imperialist politics. Because eco, as you were saying, is not automatically defined. Socialist is not automatically defined. And there's a lot of people who say they're eco and socialist who would not support no cars in LA, who would not oppose the drones, who would talk about building socialism inside the territorial borders of the United States, and they call that socialism, which is dividing up the spoils of empire and having a redistribution theory. I went to Germany, and Leon opened up and said the primary obligation of the oppressor nations is to support the people in the oppressed nations, the German left said, what? What are you talking about? Are you talking about Hitler? Well, yeah, but we're also talking about Germany today as the arch-imperialist in Europe. So my politics is sort of based on a couple of things right now about where the left should go. First, putting out very big picture, anti-hegemonic, counter-hegemonic ideas into society. Two, working in Black and Latino communities to build the Black and Latino strategic united front against imperialism, which will of course reach out to Asian Pacific Islanders, to all oppressed nationality people, to anti-racist whites, to other classes and races, but it starts in the Black and Latino Strategic Alliance in alliance with the nations and peoples of the Third World. That's been my strategy since I got involved in the movement before I knew what strategy was. You put these ideas out, you got to train organizers, and we have been able to recruit young Black and Latino kids. Would have slogans, hey, Los Angeles Unified School District, I'm pre-med, I'm pre-job, I'm not pre-prison. And we have built a movement, along with other people, other forces in Los Angeles, to counter the racist ideology of the system. But these kids care about LGBTQ issues, they care about the war, they care about no drones. They are internationalists in their orientation. But the point is we are training a new generation of organizers, and I'd like to talk about that later, but you put your body on the line and you build a movement of oppressed people. Then you have to build alliances with people that are not revolutionaries, but who actually might support you more than a lot of people who say they're revolutionaries. So don't write off the minister, don't write off the elected official, don't write off anybody. Carry out a hegemonic campaign and then build people around you, align, build forms of organization, build forms of struggle, develop an international strategy, work with people all over the world, and overthrow the empire.